I'm talking here about a little organisation called Upping, which exists in Moss Side in Manchester. We've developed quite a lot over the last 7 or 8 years that we've been going. And I think we started really as an attempt to develop the recycling in the area, because it was so bad and there was such a lot of mess and fly tipping and smelly bins and goodness knows what. And so we tried to find a project that would maybe improve that and save the council money, which maybe we could then be given to use for better community things. We very quickly realised that recycling on its own didn't work. People wouldn't do it. And we have evolved over several months, really almost a year, and eventually came up with what really did start to work, and that was talking to everybody around both sides of a back alleyway about whether they really wanted and whether it was useful for them to have a clean back alley. And that was leapt on. Everybody wants a clean alley, but they're all initially convinced that it will never happen, the council doesn't do anything, and everyone's going to make a mess of it the moment we try. But slowly over the last 6 or 7 years, alley by alley by alley, we've changed it. The alleys have become clean. We've then put planters. We raised money and put in planters and plants and all sorts of different things. Some of the alleys are gated, but quite a lot of them aren't. And the ones that aren't have manufactured their own little sort of gates, entrance ways to make people walking past realise this is actually a garden. It's not prohibited to go in, but people do need to respect it. So that's really the essence of it. What's extraordinary is that the recycling has improved massively as a result. Very little rubbish gets dumped in alleys which are green, and the bins, extraordinarily, the paper bins and the tin bins do get used much better than they were before. So in a funny sort of way, it's come full circle and works really well. But much more important than that is what it's done as a neighbourhood. In other words, neighbours have found each other by everybody being in communication with each other over greening the alley. Families all coming out to do the cleaning and the greening and the changing things. What has started off as people who never had knew each other, even though they might have been living together for sort of 20, 30 years, suddenly everybody knows their neighbours. And the act of being in the alley increases that dramatically, and kind of coming up with plans for the alley and sharing ideas about planting things and whether to make areas for children to play and stuff like that. And so actually it's become something much more exciting and developmental. And as we move alley by alley by alley, more and more people know that it's happened, and we are getting requests constantly from alleys saying, all the alleys around me are beautiful, but ours isn't. How do we do it? Please, can you help us? And so we can get started again with them. It's hard work, of course, and one of the really difficult problems is that although we're a little group that sort of holds it together, there's only really us who go out and help new alleys get started. Once an alley's green and wonderful, most of the people, or all the people in it, really only want to work on their own alley. They don't want to do what we do, which is to go and help the next alley and the next alley and the next alley. So that is really difficult. We'd love to find more people who are happy and willing to sort of work on other alleys as well. But, people don't have time and all sorts of things. So we're not blaming anybody. It's just one of the practical limitations of what we're doing. The other thing I think that's really interesting, and particularly has come into focus during lockdown, is how people are using our alleys. All the alleys that are green are now really, really being used by neighbours to spend their outdoor time. And we had, in the first 3 or 4 weeks, we had so many emails from people saying, gosh, thank you so much for helping us green our alley. I'd never realised how important it would be. And that is absolutely amazing. And we see all over Manchester, more and more alleys are now being greened, particularly because in the lockdown, people have got time to actually put the work in to clean their alleys and green them. And they're looking at other people's alleys and thinking, God, we want that too. Well, let's just do it. And so much has changed as a result of that. And one of the things that some people, so all the alleys are really different. That's what's lovely about it. Some alleys go in for lots of arty things. Some of them do lots of creative recycling using bed springs and old pots and sofas and buckets and all sorts of things like that. Some make mosaics out of broken children's breakfast bowls, and all sorts of different designs and patterns and paintings on the walls. Some go specifically into growing food, so there's a really big collection of English and Bengali in particular vegetables growing in lots of the alleyways. And of course there's courgettes and carrots and kale and lots of things that people would recognise as they're growing, which is great. We're trying to encourage people to do fruit trees, and this year's big initiative is trying to encourage everybody to have water saving. So we're trying to get people to connect water butts into the downpipes that come off some of the back yards, the back extensions that come straight out to the back alleyway, so that we can take the water directly from coming off the roof into a butt. So that's quite an important thing, particularly as this year, of course, it was really, really dry, and there's been periods of dryness in the last 2 or 3 years when actually it means people having to go in and out of their kitchens regularly to water the plants. So having people watered up is wonderful. So the other thing that's really important is some people particularly make their alleys work for wildlife. So we have, everyone's ecstatic if they see lots of different butterflies, and there's people who are growing specifically butterfly-friendly flowers, plants, and then in some of the alleys there's bats that come up every night and swoop up and down collecting all the insects that are flying about. Many, many, many alleys report how many bees there are this year flying in and out of all of their flowers, which is wonderful. And the other sort of really key thing, I think, is that in the last 2 years, last summer Manchester declared a climate emergency, which has been well overdue, but at last it's happened. And so here in Moss Side we thought Upping It needed to be quite actively engaged in thinking about climate emergency and what we do here. And the biggest single things that we're really working on, before lockdown we were working on projects with the schools to encourage children to walk and cycle to school and not come by car. So that was quite a big one, very well developed, about to start when we went in for lockdown. So that's a project ready and waiting, really. We're also terribly interested in the fact that since the lockdown, a lot of things have happened that are very good things as well as the bad things. And the most significant things that are good are the purity of the air and the lack of cars around the place. So children have been able to play out, families have been able to take their kids on bikes, there's been cycling in the park, cycling on the roads, children playing in the street rather than just in the alley. It's just been an incredible change. It makes me think, when you look back at some of the photographs of the 50s and 60s in Moss Side, they're very similar photographs to what we're seeing now, although the cars are there still, but they're just not moving here. And we really don't want to miss out on this amazing pleasure that people have had from this thing, and try really hard to see if we can create streets where cars do not go charging along, rat racing up and down and whizzing through these little straight lines of cars, but actually see if we can develop the way our street patterns work so that they're much more home and family friendly. We're calling it car calm rather than car free streets. So car calm means that any cars coming in have to come in calmly because they can't just race through, and therefore not many joyriders would really want to come down those streets because they're not easy to get through. So that's quite an important thing. Others of us are actually talking quite seriously to people about retrofitting, about their use of carbon, their use of water, whether it's possible for them to save water, lots of things like that. But again, it's absolutely having to be as people feel that they need to get involved in these things rather than pushing anybody. We've also got 2 very interesting projects that may be sending their own small video to go with this. One is the Terrace Square Artist Project, which is a number of creative people living in right across the Upping it area, which is the Terrace Square in Moss Side, have been getting together to talk about what sorts of artwork could be done and encouraged and taking part in using the alleys as our galleries. So it's performances, it's things on the walls, paintings, mosaics, all sorts of things like that. So that project has actually been running workshops and developing ideas, which is really nice. And hopefully we'll actually be able to get grants to pay those artists to go into new alleys and work with residents to do that. And the second project is something called Fallow Moss Gardens, which is the taking over of a completely sort of derelict bit of waste green space between one of the terrace streets and a kind of council housing development, which has left a really large triangular space as just wild space. And it's been wild for ages, and a group of people have now got together to try and see if we can make this work both as a sort of nature space, a quiet space, a growing space, a meditative space, a forest school even. There's a number of different ways in which this quite large area can be brought into effective sort of nature, but nature where it can be really enjoyed. So hopefully our projects will continue. If anybody wishes to get in touch with us, please do. We will put the information about us on the website. Thank you.